New South Wales is opening up to the world in what is a major policy shift announced by the Premier today. Welcome home is the message from Dominic Perrottet, who revealed that from November 1st, just over 2 weeks from now, quarantine, a cornerstone of Australia's pandemic response, will effectively be scrapped. Now, the changes are for returning travellers and tourists who are fully vaccinated. They will no longer need to quarantine in hotels or at home. Caps on the numbers of overseas arrivals will also be removed. In other changes confirmed today, the easing of a raft of restrictions on gatherings will be brought forward to this Monday, with the state on track to hit its 80% double dose target this weekend. And the restart of regional travel for Greater Sydney residents has been pushed back to November 1st. Reporter Manaz Anguri joins us now from Sydney. Manaz, significant changes announced by the New South Wales Premier today.
Hi Gemma, that's right. So from November 1st, the caps on hospitality bookings will be scrapped, but in even more significant news, as you mentioned, an end to hotel quarantine for fully vaccinated people coming into New South Wales, whether that's tourists or returning Australians, provided they are firstly fully vaccinated but also have a PCR test before their board a flight. Now, this is significant news for New South Wales residents and people coming into the state, and Dominic Perrottet, the Premier, has said that it will help lead the nation out of the pandemic. Here's what he had to say about that.
Sydney, New South Wales is open for business. We want people back. We're leading the nation out of this pandemic. A hotel quarantine, home quarantine is a thing of the past. We are opening Sydney and New South Wales to the world, and that date will come in on 1 November, and we'll continue to work closely with the Commonwealth Government to make sure protections are in place so that we keep people safe, but we rejoin the world.
So Manaz, when can the state expect to hit the next vaccination milestone?
Well, Gemma, overnight we recorded 399 new cases. That's another day of relatively low case numbers. Our vaccination rates are also going quite well. 91.4% of the eligible population have had their first dose, and 77.8% are now fully vaccinated. Everyone is very confident that we will reach that 80% milestone over the weekend, which will mean on Monday we will enter stage 2 of New South Wales roadmap out of lockdown, which will mean 20 visitors in the home, 50 people in outdoor gatherings, no caps on weddings, and standing while drinking will be permitted as well. The only thing that won't go ahead, however, is regional travel. As we know, that was set to happen when we do reach that 80% milestone, but it is now being deferred until November 1st. And the Premier says that's simply because the vaccination rates in some parts of the regions are just not there yet, and it's not safe to open up just yet. He says this may be an unpopular opinion, but ultimately he does think it's the right decision. Here's what he had to say about that.
And we have made a decision today, and I know for many it will be an unpopular decision, but as Premier I believe it is the right decision, and that is to defer regional travel from Sydney and from Greater Sydney until the 1st of November. And the reason we've made that decision is based on the vaccination rates that are in front of us, and if you look where as a percentage of LGAs that have reached that 80% double dose here in Sydney, that's where regional New South Wales will be on the 1st of November.
So because of the inconvenience this may cause regional businesses, the JobSaver payment, will be extended for regional businesses until November 1st. So a lot of things to look forward to for New South Wales residents, easing of restrictions coming in on Monday, and much more coming in the coming weeks.
Reporter Manaz Anguri, thank you. Today's announcement is a huge step forward, putting New South Wales well ahead of other states and territories when it comes to travel. The leaders from across the jurisdictions had already agreed to what's known as the National Plan, which outlines how the country opens up. To run us through the plan and how it relates to today's announcement, I'm joined by political reporter Stephanie Boris. Steffi, has New South Wales jumped ahead of this National Plan?
Well, the New South Wales government, Gemma, says that they are doing what is in the plan, but that's not quite right, because if we take a look at the plan under Phase C, that is when a state reaches 80% double dosed, there are changes to who can come and go from the country, but it does say that it's a gradual change. Specifically, it says gradual reopening of inward and outbound international travel with safe countries and proportionate quarantine to be put in place. Now, what is proportionate compassionate quarantine? Well, we did receive a statement from the Prime Minister earlier this month that outlined that, saying that come November, his hope was and the expectation was that Australians could travel in and out of the country if they were fully vaccinated, but they would have to go 1 week of home quarantine when they return to Australia. So New South Wales is completely, skipping that part of the plan. They're not even doing home quarantine. They're just going straight to letting Australians come and go from the country as they please if they're fully vaccinated, and also tourists as well. Now, that's a really interesting point, Gemma, because on the national plan, the idea of allowing tourists freely to come and go from Australia wasn't really until Phase D, and Phase D doesn't even have a vaccine rate on it in terms of when that comes into play, because Australia is actually a lot further ahead than what we thought we'd be at this time of the year.
So with all that in mind, what has the federal government had to say about today's announcement?
Well, there's been radio silence, Gemma, which I think says a lot in itself too. There's different suggestions swirling around at the moment, one being that the Prime Minister thought today's announcement was just about Australians being able to travel overseas and back and not tourists. The New South Wales Premier, Dominic Perrottet, was asked today if he briefed the Prime Minister on the announcement, and this is what he had to say.
We've had numerous discussions with the federal government, and we want to open up. Obviously, returning Australians will naturally be the first cab off the rank. That is clear, and that is important. And whether that's returning Australians from other states as well, like if we can play a role in that, I'm very passionate about doing that. We want to have as many Australians. No, we're going to get tourists back as quickly as possible. From a New South Wales perspective, we're not going to discriminate.
Now, that's the New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet, and as I mentioned, Gemma, we still haven't heard from the Prime Minister's office in terms of what this announcement exactly means, but we do know the Commonwealth has a role to play once this comes into place. For example, people are required to get a PCR test before they come back into Australia, or if they're coming to Australia, all that paperwork has to go via the Commonwealth. Likewise, in terms of checking that people are double vaccinated with an approved vaccine, that's a Commonwealth responsibility. So while this announcement has been made by New South Wales, the Commonwealth does have a part to play in this too.